you.
discussions. Okay.
Thank you, Gokhan. That was a very interesting and philosophical discussion, I must say. And I'm sure because people who have joined most of them are scholars, and even the members of our forum who have joined here, they are quite well read. So I'm sure this kind of philosophical discussion, which is not exactly the kind of theological discussion that you see in any mosque, they could have found it a little different from what they normally listen to. But then it's quite interesting. It was very revealing, in fact, So I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed the discussion. In fact, I was also going through your book today, especially the chapter and on Islamic idea of nature. And that chapter was quite interesting. But I think because of lack of time, you have missed out on the last item on your in your chapter, the idea of God itself.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. I think you have not discussed that, but I think we'll come to that a little later. But before that, I would like to ask you, I think before we open up the discussion for questions, which will be in the next 5-10 minutes, I think now it's about 7:40. Maybe we can have a 10-minute discussion before we open up for the questions. What I would like to ask you is, Ibn Rushd, as you have written in your book, Ibn Rushd actually criticized Ghazali's idea of God's sole agency, right? He said that that's highly reductionist and flawed.
Tiran. He calls it as a Tiran. Yeah.
Yeah, and he talks about secondary causes, I mean, other agencies, I mean, and denying which amounts to sophistry, he says. So could you say something about those secondary causes, I mean, what are the secondary causes that Ibn Rushd talks about?
Yeah, well, basically, they're natural laws.
Slightly, I mean, briefly mention that. I think the participants would enjoy listening to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, this is mainly about how to explain things happen in nature. By secondary causes means that there are some regular or autonomous laws. Okay, this is secondary natural law. So the question is whether there are regular, which God does not suspend, or autonomous, such as natural law, and as a result of these two secondary causes, human agency. So when I say secondary causes, we accept that in Rushd. To some extent, Kitab al-Tawhid accepts the same perspective, even in a very fuzzy, because systematically speaking, Kitab al-Tawhid is a very fuzzy book. It's not systematic like other guys. So to some extent, even in Maturidi, you accept that human being is an agent. So here's the problem. In classical Ash'ari, or updated in Ghazali, they see human being as an agent, as a contempt of God, okay? But interestingly, Ibn Rushd, I noticed that they seeing God part of nature as an ordinary agent, as a contempt of God. So in Ibn Rushd, to some extent in Maturidi, to some extent Ibn Khaldun, because Ibn Khaldun has a very interesting attempt. Actually, Ibn Khaldun doesn't synthesize. In my reading, actually there are some books such as Muhsin Mahdi from Hers. If you read them, you see that Ibn Khaldun separates them, is no longer interested in this reconciliation, and he says that this is religion, this is causality in history, so on and so forth. So by secondary causes, we refer to natural law, which are regular, giving the same impulse, given the same conditions, and autonomous plus human agency.
Yeah. Interesting. In fact,
so let me give an example. Okay, sorry, I just. So
no, go ahead. Yes, please.
Yeah, for example, I mean, putting it very simplistic term. Ibn Rushd, God is like sun. He is the major cause, but is not agent. He's not. So sun is. So I am speaking here. I use consume energy. God is the origin of everything. Sun is the origin of energy. So sun is the major cause, but sun does not decide what I am doing. Okay, so this is the theology. So there is a Turkish scholar who studied on these discussions, and his conclusion is very interesting. By a kind of motto, he says that the motto of classical Islam means before 11th century, La ilaha illallah, but the motto of Ash'ari in this regard is La fa'ila illallah. So Ash'ari is not satisfied by La ilaha illallah, but La fa'ila illallah. So in Mu'tazila, yes, God is the major cause, the first
Yes.
cause, but he's not agent in our universe, so we are free. To be honest, I'm not in a position to advise on that. This problem cannot be solved, Faiz, because we are talking
Yes.
about divine and human. So there is no
Yes.
way. So there are two logical consequences. One is we can discuss endlessly. The second is we should sacrifice.
Yes.
So because I mean, this is a very essential question about God and human nature. So there is no way to, let's say, dovetail them because they are different in nature. So the idea of proposing an explanation of divine intervention or human freedom, I find it's quite naive and it's an endless debate. So in the case of Mu'tazile, they sacrifice God's intervention and they said, okay, human being is creator of his action, or Maturidi to some extent, he's the actor of his own.
Could this be, Gokhan, the result of what you mentioned in your book? In fact, Ahmad Kuru also, that is also the main thesis of Ahmad Kuru, the ulama state nexus or alliance. You also mentioned the Nizamiya Madrasa and the alliance of the Seljuk state. It was this alliance which led the Asharism, Ashari theology or Ashari ideology spread throughout the region, especially Damascus, Mosul, Isfahan, all these centers. In Damascus, you write in your book that in the 12th and 13th centuries, the number of madrasas went from 29 to or 23 to 89 suddenly. There was a huge rise in the number of madrasas, all Ashari madrasas, based on the Dars-e-Nizamiya of that time, the Nizamiya syllabus, of Nizam al-Mulk of the Seljuk Vizier. So is that the reason for why today, even today, it is the Ashari view that prevails? And that is perhaps, you spoke about the case in Turkey too. Because the second other relevant question would be, you know better than me that today in Turkey, the idea of deism is also spreading fast, where God is non-interventionist. Yes, God did create the universe, God did create everything in it, but He does not intervene in it on a daily basis. The idea of deism. So the recent survey in surveys in Turkey have revealed that a lot of youth in Turkey are losing their faith in the kind of religion that is being propagated through the Diyanat or other madrasa systems, on other religious systems. So now they stopped believing in them. In fact, they now believe that there is there is the idea of deism where God does not intervene, doesn't have to intervene. Nature takes care of itself. That's how it has been devised. That's how it has been designed to work. What would you say on that?
Well, concerning your first question, I agree. I mean, I think one major reason, historical reason why we have this Ash'ari is the state ulama alliance, but that's true. I mean, not only Selçukis, later even in Mamluks, we see that, some states supporting.
That is always the case, yes.
Yeah, this is Diyanet is as well in Turkey. Why state is financing thousands of imams? Because, so this is major reason. But the second is, as I said, the Ash'ari is very simple, very populist. Okay, it's very easy to market. You understand? I mean, people are happy to see God, explaining everything. So the philosophical alternatives are very, let's say, detailed inquiries. So it's not compatible. And don't forget that the Sunnism has become almost a ritualistic religion based on rituals, namaz, salah, this kind of stuff. So I think it's beyond that. Yes, state ulama alliance is one reason. I emphasize on this in my book as well. But it's about also the simplistic nature of this populist idea. So we should treat Ash'arism as a populist interpretation theology, which is fine. I mean, it's not peculiar to Islam. If you go to West, you see some populist interpretations of many ideas. For example, the populist idea of politics, populist idea of art. But of course, there are some exceptional serious guys in Ash'ari, such as Bakillah and such as Razi. So, but how people consume it always is a bit far right, Anyway, so I agree. But as I said, the second point is, as I said, there are some alternatives on air, such as Maturidi, but I don't think there are strong intellectual paradigms. There are some kind of individualistic attempts. So they are never become organized. So there is a Maturidi, but there are a few guys who did right. So they don't have this intellectual organizational skill to affect people. Ash'ari is very, very organized, very strong. There are many people. I mean, you have Juwayni, you have Ghazali, you have many other people. So technically, even practically, for me, I accept there is a paradigm named Al-Maturidi, but I don't think it's existing. I don't think it's just like Ash'ari. So it's just like an intellectual construction. In practice, people are going through Ash'ari. When it comes to,
sorry.
Yeah, second question, I completely agree with you. The first problem is the Ash'ari cosmology is mainly made by people who live in medieval ages. So, if we follow the Sayyid Hussein Nas or Charles Taylor, we should accept that the Sunni Islamic idea of nature is a reflection of medieval age Muslim cosmology. Things change. Let me give you an example. For example, Ghazali in Tahafut says that who believes that universe is eternal is infidel. There is Stanford University new expansions theory, they say it's eternal. The old expansion school, Alan Gutt, MIT, I'm regularly following his lectures, master lectures on, so he's saying that the universe might be eternal. So the problem is, I'm not an expert on that field, but the problem is what Ghazali knows about nature, knows about universe. Let me remind you, we know Andromeda since 1935. So before 1935 Hubble, we thought that Milky Way is the only, universe. So just like updating problem Islamic law, shall we update Islamic law, for example, according to what? According to West, according to Norway, or are we happy about the how Islamic law is interpreted in terms of women? The question when it goes to the idea of nature is about, shall we update it according to modern science or not? Because for me, the main problem in Turkey is to follow medieval idea of cosmology, which is a problem, what you mentioned in regard to young people. Young people doesn't buy it. They find it childish, to be honest, okay? They don't find it persuasive, okay? There's a God intervening, and they say the problems. I mean, there's a causality, so there is a need for a sophisticated. So I'm not against the popular consumption of Ash'arism among Muslims, but there must be some alternatives to persuade those people. Otherwise, they become deism. I think Turkish deism is a kind of, let's say, a kind of Mu'tazila. That's why if you read the critical literature in Turkish, which one of the chapter in my upcoming book is about that, they always refer to Mu'tazila, Mu'tazila. So this is mainly the deism. So they keep
refer to what you said?
Sorry?
They refer to what you said?
Neo-Mu'tazila, okay? Because so they are not happy about the traditional idea of nature, but they don't want to leave Islam. So the resultant is a kind of Neo-Mu'tazila, okay? So there is a God, but there's a nature, but still there are many problems. So I agree completely with you. There are many studies that, especially among urban young people, after particularly 20 years, the Islamic moment in Turkey, many people are no longer satisfied by this theology in terms of science, in terms of new developments. But the question is, how to change that? I mean, can we update Islamic theology based by modern science? The question is, I don't think there are high qualified religious actors to do it. I read, for example, many books on that. For example, I read this exegesis tafsir written by three leading Turkish professors of theology. Save nature, natural sciences. As a political scientist, I find their knowledge on modern social science is very poor, very poor. I mean, forget about natural sciences, modern social science, I mean, psychiatry, modern theories of state. So the problem is, if you update Islamic idea of theology, you need some religious guys who either should accept authority of scientists, which is very difficult, or some qualified religious actors. I will give you an example. While reading this book, I analyze key guys who shaped Turkish idea of nature in early 20th century. I don't want to give their names. I don't want to be offended. But while they were living in Turkey, we have Einstein, Solvay, Bohr, Hubble, Heisenberg, no quotation. They tried to revive Islam according to 18th, 17th, 16th century madrasa cosmologist doctrines.
Right.
So if you go to Egypt if you go to even 19th century India, except some guys like Sayyid Ahmed Khan, most of the revivalists of Islam, they were reviving the Ash'ari theology, which is reflection of medieval Islamic ideas.
Absolutely.
Okay?
I think that is the crux of the issue there, Gokhan, because I mean, to give you an example, there is a very interesting verse in the in Surah Baqarah, which reads like this, Badi'u samawati wal arz وَإِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونُ. So yeah, right, this kun fayakun phrase in the Quran has been interpreted for ages, that God, when he decides something, to create something, he just says to it be, and the thing comes into existence. So this is, in my opinion, a very flawed understanding of the verse. Kun fayakun does not talk about instant creation. In fact, no creation in the universe ever since its evolution has been instant. Perhaps the only thing instant was the evolution itself, which the Big Bang so-called, which just began, to spew matter in all directions, the singularity from which everything began. So that's the only thing which was instant. Otherwise, it is a process. So the Quran does not talk about instant creation. The phrase وَإِذَا قَضَى أَمْرًا فَإِنَّمَا يَقُولُ لَهُ كُنْ فَيَكُونُ actually signifies a process. So, but our understanding, the medieval understanding of the Quran, which was not informed by modern scientific findings, and even today, as you said, people fall back on that medieval understanding of the Quran, and they are unwilling to re-examine or rethink. Therefore, unless we try to re-examine our own views in the light of modern findings, because the Quran says that, the basic idea of the Quran itself is, it asks for evidence. For instance, there is a famous verse in the Quran which says, Hatu burhanakum in kuntum sadiqin. Produce evidence if you are truthful, meaning the Quran emphasizes on evidence-based findings, evidence-based research, or evidence-based understanding of the nature itself. So therefore, when we talk about evidence-based or science, it is Quranic. Quran wants you to be scientific. So therefore, why don't we Muslims follow the Quran and be scientific in our approach, and tries to understand the Quran itself in a scientific paradigm,
Yeah,
so that perhaps could be one of the reasons why the Quran has been misunderstood or misinterpreted all these years, centuries, in fact.
Well, yeah, I would say, I will be happy, for your argument, but the problem is there are millions of people who disagree with you.
Yeah, of course.
There are many ways to interpret Quran, which is fine. There are many ways to interpret American Constitution. Even the Supreme Court changed his mind many times. Okay, so interpretation is endless. But the problem is when we say the mainstream paradigm is so this is the main Ash'ari paradigm, Ghazali paradigm. Okay, so Ghazali is the key scholar of Turkish Islam. If you read literature on causality, you always quotations to Ghazali. Yeah. So I agree with you. And there are, for example, Ibn Khaldun. As I said, that he is the guy who discovered causality in social history. Okay, so if we are talking about modernity in terms of social science, we should start with Ibn Khaldun in 15th century. So 15th century. So how come Ibn Khaldun was a Muslim, the guy who discovered? And if you read, there are long sections between the philosophy of Aristotle or through Ibn Rushd and Ghazali in Ibn Khaldun. But the problem is no reference to Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun is an intellectual guy among Muslims, especially even in Turkey. So the problem is the Islam that we use in socialization. I use that socialization in term. So when you, for example, I review many literature, 3 Islamic movements, 8-year compulsory religious education. There is no reference to Ibn Khaldun. So Islamic tradition has many scholars who accept causality, who accept other different alternatives to interpret Quran. But the problem is the mainstream paradigm is still the Ash'ari paradigm.
Yes.
And beyond many problems it produces, for me, it's substantially problematic because
absolutely
it continues pre-modern pre-17th century idea of
Excellent.
nature.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think this is what we need to challenge.
That's right. Yeah. So the problem is, the question is, okay, how to solve this problem? There are two alternatives. One is to follow the Western example, which is the Descartes. Descartes just said, okay, let religion go this way and the science, for me, no problem. But when you talk about the mainstream, because usually people are happy to see that's, you know, bring religion and science together, very difficult, because there is this state ulema alliance is still continuing. They don't accept, okay? For example, I mean, go to Turkey. After any major accident, religion intervenes, says, this is God, you know, okay? So if there are tens of people lost, so religion is very useful for states still and people. But
absolutely.
more critical is, who is the Islamic agents who can sit and speculate on theology vis-a-vis recent developments in science at NASA level or, you know, some genetic level? The problem is leading Islamic agents are not qualified in such scientific. So it's difficult to match religious guys along with scientists. We don't have that qualified agents. So this is very naive idea for me.
Yes, I agree with you.